Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Jennifer J, and we are into part 44 today. I know we're getting right up there. I don't know, write on the line in the comments if you would. Tell me a suggestion for what I could call these, because I feel really silly now that we're up into big numbers. When it started and it was part 1, part 2, that was okay. But part 44 sounds kind of odd to me. So what should I be calling these? What sounds good? I don't know. Episode 44 or segment or chapter. I don't know what to call it. At any rate, for today, it's going to be part 44. I am into May already, so we're going to be talking about May the 1st. And if you haven't subscribed yet, real quick, if you'd go and hit the subscribe, don't forget to do that, or share it with someone that you know might be able to glean something from these as well. And we're going to start on May 1st. I actually watched I went to church with my pastor, Mackie, which is what we're going to talk about today. And then I watched 2 online. One was Tony Evans. That was a really good one. And there was one other. So I really want to get to those, but I don't know if I'll get to them today or not. So we're going to just start in 2 Samuel chapter 6, if you want to go there. And we're going to start with, I really have struggled because I don't want to read the whole chapter to you guys, like you know how to read, right? But sometimes some of this history you just kind of need to get, because I know especially new Christians, or some even more experienced Christians, but are much more familiar with the New Testament. And so Old Testament stuff, maybe you haven't heard if you haven't been in Sunday school your whole life or whatever. And so some of these stories you might not be as familiar with. So I really, really, really recommend that you go back and read them for yourself. Make some time to really sit down and read it. Or on the YouVersion app, you can have it read it to you if you like the audiobook better. You can have it read it to you. You can even pick what voice reads it to you. So it's male or female, American or English or whatever. So pick your choice of what's easy on your ears. But we're going to be in chapter 6, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit of backstory. So the Philistine army had stolen, in essence, the Ark of the Covenant. Now, if you don't know what the Ark of the Covenant is, this is where we have to kind of get into a history lesson. If you don't know what the Ark of the Covenant is, I'm not going to go into all of that today, but you can find it in the book of Exodus. I think it's in chapter 25, I think. If you don't find it, private message me and I'll find it for you. But the Ark of the Covenant is talked about in the book of Exodus. And so God explains what it is and how to build it and who's allowed to touch it and all this sort of thing, okay? He puts all the rules around it because it is the holy place for God to dwell. And so during the fighting of David's army and the Philistine army, the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant and they put it on an ox cart. So 2 oxen that have have reins on them, but that's not the right word. They have bits in their mouth and reins, but they have a cart that they're pulling, right? And they set the Ark of the Covenant on the cart and they took it away. And the place where they took it was blessed while it was there. And David heard that that person's house had been blessed because the Lord was present there with him, and he was determined they were going to go back and they were going to get the Ark of the Covenant, right? So in chapter 6 of 2 Samuel, and my pastor did a sermon on this, I don't remember what he called it now, but David danced or something. Anyway, he goes back. So it says David took 30,000 choice men with him. So the best of the best, right? The big, strong, brawny guys that were good fighters. And they went up with all the people who were with him from Baal, Judah, to bring the Ark of God, who is called the Lord of Hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. So they set the Ark of God on a new cart. So they went to get the Ark of the Covenant, and they put it on a new cart. So they didn't use the old cart that the Philistines had used. They put it on a new cart. And I'll just keep reading instead of getting ahead of myself. So they set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abimadab, which was on the hill, and Uzzah and Ahio, the son of Abinadab, drove the new cart. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. So the son of Abinadab went in front of the ark, and it was on a hill. So those are important things to know. And then David and all the house of Israel played music before the Lord on all kinds of instruments of fir wood, on harps, on stringed instruments, on tambourines, on sistrums, and on cymbals. I just want to stop and pause there for just a second. This has nothing to do with what this sermon was about, I think there's a lot in that, but I don't know if you guys have ever heard of churches that will only play piano music, like they don't allow guitars and things. I know of these churches. I know of these churches in my hometown in Kansas. So I know they exist, but right here, it's talking about King David, which was a man after God's own heart, and they're playing all sorts of music. I think that music is okay. It's a good thing, and it's a joyful noise. That was just a little sidebar. Anyway, when they came to Nation's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it because the oxen stumbled. So if you can imagine, okay, they've got two of these large animals, two oxen that are pulling this cart, and they're driving the oxen, right? Having to like whip their sides or whatever, get them to pull, get them to, however you get an oxen to move, to pull the load. And they're on a hill, and so it's kind of getting, the oxen stumble, and what's going to happen? The cart's going to tumble off or something, right? So he reaches out to keep it from falling. And you know what happens next? If you know the story, you know. But then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him for, I'm so stumbling over my words today, I'm so sorry. The Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God. So he reached out to keep it from falling, and God struck him dead. And we're going to talk about that because this was the Holy of Holies, and you were not supposed to touch it. It had very real and very strict rules about it, and those are in the, we're in the Old Testament in 2 Samuel, but even further in the book of the law, in Exodus, it was very clearly defined to them what they could do with the Ark of the Covenant, and touching it was not allowed. So he died, and David became angry because of the Lord's outbreak against Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. I've read a little bit, my pastor didn't say this, but I read a little bit of the theology behind why David maybe was angry, is that he maybe was angry at himself because it was kind of his fault. Because also in Exodus, it described exactly how they were to move the Ark of the Covenant. And having it on an ox cart, even if it was a new ox cart, was not how they were supposed to carry it. So had it been being carried correctly, it wouldn't have fallen. It was not being carried correctly. And so then he reached out innocently to try and save it, and yet not innocently, because he shouldn't have been anywhere near it, like spotting it. He shouldn't have had that impulse, because he shouldn't have been there. David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" So David would not move the ark of the Lord with him into the city of David, but David took it aside into the house of Obed-Edom. And the ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, 3 months. And the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. So that makes me think of, sometimes And maybe David was mad at himself, or maybe he didn't realize, maybe he was just mad at God. And maybe he didn't fully understand yet. I don't know what the problem was. Maybe he didn't fully grasp where the error came in. And I think we do that sometimes, when things don't go the way we think they should, or we think God said a certain thing, but then it doesn't go the way we think it should. And it very well could be that it's because of our own sin. It's because we didn't follow the directions, so to speak. So really think about that. When you feel like God's talking to you, but then maybe you go along and then all of a sudden you feel like, what happened? It could just be that you're getting in your own way. So, and we are going to talk about that in a minute. So now this is the part that the pastor spoke on, and this is verse 12. Now it was told King David, saying, the Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him because of the ark of God. So David went and brought the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with gladness. And it was so, when those bearing the ark of God had gone 6 paces, those bearing the ark of God. So now it's not on a cart anymore, is it? David understands that it's supposed to be carried on the shoulders. So something Pastor Mackey had said was, when it was on the ark of God, when it was on the ox cart, it was down low, right? The men were above it. It was here. And it wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be above them. So if they're carrying it on their shoulders, then it's above them, not below them. And God should always be above us. So that was one interesting thing I thought that he pulled out of that. But also because the instructions clearly said to carry it on their shoulders. So those bearing the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, and then he sacrificed an oxen and a fatted sheep. And then he danced before the Lord with all his might. And David was wearing a linen ephod. That is also important. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with loud sound of trumpet. Could you imagine, first of all, they went 6 steps and then they rested. They paused because kind of like creation, right? 6 days and then rest. And so they were to go 6 paces and then rest. And he made a sacrifice. I don't know how far they went, but how long do you think it would have taken to get it where it was going if they took 6 paces and then they pause while he kills an animal and sacrifices it? Killing an animal takes some time. Killing it and draining the blood and cutting the parts and offering the burnt sacrifice. I mean, you've got to get the hide off of it and there's stuff to do when you do that. If you've ever seen anybody that goes hunting, or if you know anything about hunting, there's a lot involved with the carcass once they have it. So I just think how much time that must have taken. So that's interesting to me, but they did it right. They did it the holy way. They did it the way it was prescribed to them to do this time. And also, David was wearing a linen ephod. So if you go back to Exodus, I'm not going to know, maybe 18. Let me see. I think I have it marked. 28. Exodus 28. It talks about, and I think it starts in verse 6, but it talks about the linen ephod. So that is something that was prescribed for the priests to wear. So, and it's very intricate description, very exact of how they are to make it and what it's supposed to be like and everything like that. So that is a priestly garment. And so, if we were really digging in, there's just so much just in this, because David wasn't a priest and yet he was a new kind of priest in the order of Melchizedek. And so he is a picture of the coming priest of Jesus, the ultimate high priest. And so there's a lot that we could get into and all that, but we're not going to today. Because what I wanted to focus on is what Pastor Mackey focused on, and that is, you can't come to God with unholy hands. You can't touch holy things with unholy hands. So Uzzah had reached out his hand to help the Ark of the Covenant not to fall, but the Ark of the Covenant was holy and he was not, because we are sinners. And so that was the first thing. And that made me think of our daily Bible time, or our daily meditation or prayer or Devo or whatever it is that we do. So for me personally, how this spoke was when I am doing my prayer time in the morning, and I told you guys, I think more than once, I don't actually get out of bed. Like, I'm still in bed and I'm turning on my Bible app and I'm listening to my Devo and whatever. And then eventually I sit up and I'm actually reading, and I actually read, usually not in my Bible, although sometimes I do, it's on my nightstand, but usually I'm reading on the Bible app, and I don't have it read to me this part of my study. I actually read myself. My eyes are now open and, get the sleep out and whatever. But this brought to my attention that maybe we should take it a little more seriously. God is holy, like so holy. And he allows us to come to his throne of grace. And shouldn't I do that with much more reverence than what I have been doing, laying in my bed? Like, I think it's good to talk to God anytime, anywhere, and that's awesome. But for my designated daily time to meet with the Lord, I should be able to get up off my butt. Don't you think? I should be able to get out of my bed. I should be able to get on my knees. I should be able to have a posture of adoration and prayer. So that's what that was saying to me on May the 1st. Also then, it talked about David dancing to the Lord. So typically, David was a king. And typically in those days, people danced for the king. So people would come and dance for David, for David's pleasure or David's enjoyment or whatever. But David, with no shame at all, he was the king. This would be like having our president, at a toga party. I don't know, whooping and hollering. Maybe not a toga party, but you know what I'm saying? Like, casting off all shame or self-consciousness or anything, and just unashamedly dancing before our king and David's king, and he was dancing for his king. Just shouts of joy and praise and adoration. His wife at the time, if you keep reading, she looked out the window and was ashamed of him. She was embarrassed for him. And he didn't care. He was like, whatever. I'm dancing for God. I'm not dancing half naked for these young ladies who think I'm smoking hot or whatever. I had a pure heart. I was dancing for God. And so, God ended up making her barren. She had no children. But David was just shameless in his adoration for God. And I think we get into church and we get so self-conscious of everybody around us. Do we raise our hands like this, or halfway, or one, or, can we reach them out wide? Is everybody going to think we're so weird if we just sing like this? Or if we dance? Or, maybe go out into the aisle and dance because it's just for God and you're just so excited. And it's okay if you're not, but I just think so many times we get so self-conscious we want to act like everybody's acting around us instead of just not caring what everybody around us is doing and just communing with God. And I think that's so important. And it's important to do in our assembling of ourselves together at church, but it's important to do in our quiet time, just at home. And David did that. He just was not ashamed. He was the king. Like, people looked to him, and he didn't care. He did not care. So, if you keep reading, it will say, David told his wife, I will play music before the Lord, and I will be even more undignified than this, and I will be humble in my own sight. Because to him, it wasn't about what other people thought. So we need to be careful of that too. So those are the two things I pulled out of this lesson was, the reverence that we need to have when we come before God. We need to make sure that we're always being reverent with his name, not using his name in vain, whether it's Jesus or Christ or God. People use his name in lots of ways that are incorrect. And we need to be careful that we're not one of them, because that is not taken lightly by God. And so reverencing him, I think, is important. And then not being ashamed of the joy and the praise that we give to God. Not being ashamed of our reverence either, but not being ashamed to praise and glorify him. And people are watching, other people were watching David. His wife was watching scornfully, judgmentally, probably, holier than thou kind of attitude. The people, the 30,000 choice men and all the people that went with him, they were looking at him as, this is our leader. This is the dude that killed Goliath. And this is God's chosen king. And this is, our new priest. And they're looking at him going, he's not ashamed. He's not ashamed of worshiping his God. And, back in those days, there were lots and lots of false gods. And so they really looked to David to be that example. And I think we need to be that example to those around us. So I don't know who that you might come in contact with this week, or what church you go to, or how they worship, or how you feel comfortable worshiping. But during your quiet time this week, I would challenge you to make it more reverent, really prepare your heart and confess your sins and get right with God before you start talking with him in the morning. Or, you got to talk with him to confess, but, before you start praying or adoring and worshiping him, maybe come clean first. And then when you are assembled together, whether it's in your life group or a Bible study or church or whatever it is, that you would maybe close your eyes and just tune into God, and just tune into whatever worship song is playing, or the word being spoken by the pastor, or whatever it is. Just close your eyes and don't think about everybody else around you. Just commune with God and allow yourself to raise your hands or stomp your feet or let out a whopping hallelujah, whatever it is. Just be uninhibited before God and have a holy time of worship and adoration with him that's just from your core. So I would challenge you to do that. Put a comment if you disagree with me, or if you've done it, or what your experience was like, or maybe even what your church does. Are you hand raisers? Are you amen shouters? Are you all really quiet? There are some churches, very conservative, very quiet. But what do you feel comfortable with? I'd love to know. And what are you willing to risk in your worship time with God to maybe look silly or foolish to others that don't understand. So let me know. I'd be really curious to know. So until next time, when we will still be on May 1st, because I have 2 more. I think I took up all our time for today. So yeah, we've got out of time. But enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you again on Thursday. Bye-bye.